I had a lot of viewers ask me to make a video on the Outpost and what actually works. So yeah, let's get over to it. And the first thing that I want to explain are the color explanations. They're the same as from the rest of my tier lists. Basically, they're taken from the class shards in game to show just what the class is about, and that's pretty much it, just to make it easier to show you. And here they're all broken down in tiers. First we have Prime League High Meta. That's pretty much best of the best that really excels in the Prime League, and that's very commonly used and will give you very good results up there. Prime League Low Meta, a bit of a less meta options. They can still work, and sometimes you will see them in Prime League, but quite a bit less than the first tier. And again, these are very solid options, especially because some people like to keep their outposts very fresh and unpredictable. So that's one thing to also consider. There's another tier good up to Caminus and Cyber Leagues. Well, pretty much self-explanatory. They're really good up to Caminus, maybe like low Cyber, something like this. And lastly, good up to Platinum and Caminus. Again, bots that work as outposts, but later on lose their shine as you will be encountering much stronger and more competent attackers. And lastly, I have something in addition, pretty much to show which combats work for outpost duty. Um, pretty much like the best ones and good alternatives, pretty much who function. So I will go over them at the end, but let's start with the bots at the top. So Prime League High Meta, Laser Optimus and Armada Megatron. They're very solid, especially with G1 Core. It gives them damage reduction, it increases their ability damage, and with their ability they can hit multiple bots, they can do very fair amount of damage, they can also stun multiple bots, and that's extremely useful. So for Outpost, I would highly suggest you go with G1. Amalgamous works, but there are battle bots for Amalgamous, and G1 is perfectly sufficient, and the damage reduction while they're casting ability is very useful. It prevents them from getting sniped while they're casting ability. And as for combat, Side Trick and Growl would probably be the first choice, definitely. But again, that's why I want to show the rest here, because some of these combats are first and best choices, but you just don't have enough of them. So that's why I just want to show you alternative choices. For example, yes, he works with Sidetrack and Growl perfectly, but he can also work with something like Big Daddy and Groundhog on Outpost. He can work with Zor and Slugfest. He can work with Bostrek and Lancelot for hack immunity. He can work with Anorex for more survivability. He can work with Forge of Soulless. He can work with a Star Saber. I was trying to give you ideas, show you what's best, but what also works as an alternative, because you may quite simply not have all of the best in slot choices immediately. Okay, now let's get to Hot Rod and Nemesis Prime. Now, they really need the maxed out base to shine. For example, they are not that great in a under-leveled base. The reason why they really shine is for, I believe, around 12 seconds or so. They make themselves and one additional building or bot completely unkillable. Also increases the speed, which will in turn increase the damage, and they can carry Nightstick and Fracas, which are combats that you will see a lot on this list. But the reason why this combat is so good is it blocks healing, and every competent player will use a healer. So acid blocks healing, and it can be a huge pain. But again, this needs to really max out base, really juice the gills to really shine. But yeah, G1 for the speed increase and Nightstick and Fracas. Alternatives, you could go with something like a Vector, I guess. But G1 is definitely very viable. Red Alert and Run Amok. Um, they're so strong because they can apply 50% damage reduction and stun immunity to extremely wide area. A lot of defenses and bots will be protected. So if you have a heavy healing base, for example, all of the meta bases will have the prime cores like Micronus and Alchemist, which will give them a lot of healing and survivability. So being able to cut the damage that they receive will heal up the base quite a lot, and it can be a huge problem, much greater problem than it may seem on the surface. And again, Nightstick and Fracas to block healing, but it also works with a couple of other combats, but this one is just best in slot. And Vector is best in slot in terms of core, because it will make him pretty much resurrect once, and that's very strong. Alternatives would be G1 core and Liege core. Now G1 will make him a bit more survivable. Um, it's an option if you not have if your vector is busy, then G1 works. But Liege, the reason why Liege works is because it makes him immune to hacks, so that he cannot be hacked. And a lot of people will run Beachcomber Deluge on offense to, hack outposts and their own Liege core, which will hack outposts. And if your own outpost is spreading acid on your defenses, it can be a problem. So that's why some also opt out for Liege, but otherwise Vector will work perfectly fine. Optimus, and Transmetal to Megatron. They are incredible, very bulky. Their ability does a lot of damage, but even if a competent player will dodge their ability, but even if they dodge it, the reason why these bots are so strong, very, very strong stats, and they also have a passive that phases enemies for every couple of seconds, and that phase is no one is immune to that phase. That's extremely strong. And for defense, you want to go with their Golden Disc core because it gives them a revive and it also gives them reflection. As for combat, the best in slot would be either Forge of Soulless or Anorax and Fireglide. Now, what does the Forge do? Well, Forge gives you a revive. Now, the revive sadly does not work on defense when paired with Golden Disc. So the revive only works on offense twice. If you do not run Golden Disc, then you can absolutely run Forge and get the revive from Forge. But otherwise, these revives do not stack. You still only get one revive. But the reason what you also get is you get hack immunity. You deal a lot of damage to enemy attackers. You stun them. You heal yourself. Overall, Forge is amazing. And Anorax and Fireglide, they increase your health significantly and improve healing. They increase your damage if your bot will be hit by elements, and he will be. Um, and in addition, when your bot is dead, Anorax and Fireglide turn into a bulky minion. So yeah, very very incredible options. But again, these are best in slot, but other good options can work like Sidetrack Growl, Big Daddy Groundhog. Just to give you an idea. Now, Beachcomber Deluge, an absolute must-have outpost, a nightmare to deal with on defense, and absolute best in slot would be his G1 core and Jace and Barrow, because it makes him just unkillable. It's the most. It's just a nightmare. Um, by far, nothing really comes close to this setup. This makes him by far the most unkillable, by far the most nightmarish to deal with, and really no exceptions. This one is easily, no exceptions. Overall, he's a very strong defense, definitely the strongest defense bot in the game currently. So yeah, if you do have him, absolutely run him, invest into him, he will be really good. Swoop and Scourge, they can deal a truckload of damage. They can also stun at ability level 11, so you want to go with the G1 core to increase damage further. And as for combat, it would be Big Daddy and Groundhog. Now, there is a strategy currently, at least in the game, that has not been fixed, that involves um, basically Swoop and Scourge are able to drop this particular combat outside of the map, where this combat cannot be targeted by enemies, but can target enemies. So that's a bit naughty, but apparently developers are looking to fix this. But until then, this still works. And another thing, Beachcomber and Deluge, if they're put as outposts right next to each other, and there are no other buildings, Beachcomber can tag Swoop with his ability, and Swoop will go in circles, do his thing, and in addition, he will be hacking. So a lot of people are using this to force combiner drops before kill zone. So yeah, it can be a pretty cruel combo. So just something to consider. Cosmos and Mind Wipe, they're very strong. They are very bulky for an R class. They have decent survivability, but also they hack. They hack up to 2 targets, and uh, what we currently have working now, they will be released publicly in the batches, and if there are no further changes, the hack will be increased to up to 3 targets. So this will further increase the value. Now, of course, it's subject to change. He may stay with only 2 targets being able to hack, but it will probably increase to 3. Just something to pay attention to. And again, G1 core. People are alternating between the defense and the tech core. I think it will depends on you and what you feel is the most valuable one. But yeah, and as for combat, Big Daddy and Groundhog, but he can also work with Sidetrack Growl, Zor Slugfest, combats like this. Okay, now a Twin Twist and Coelagon, very powerful. Absolutely best bot for Amalgamus. Because he's a nightmare, he can do so much damage to enemy squad. He can really shred very squishy bots. If you do not have a tank, he's an absolute nightmare. And Swicheck and Growl, easily I would go with them as the best ones because they're such nightmares combats. But again, he can also work with the Big Daddy and Groundhog. He can even work with Jace and Barrow for more survivability, but absolutely go with Sidetrick and Growl if you have them. Lightspeed and Iron Bison. Uh, First off, with his G1, he has two revives. He also is a warrior, so he has a huge HP pool. He has stun immunity from perks. Forge of Souls makes him immune to hacks. Um, and all the other perks that I've mentioned that Forge of Souls gives. Really incredible overall. And his ability also applies a form of blind, which is kind of like range reduction. Pretty much makes affected targets do less damage. So yeah, very strong outpost. Absolutely incredible. 5-star if you have it. Very survivable and overall a nightmare to deal with. Now, let's go to the Prime League low meta, Blaster and Soundwave. For outpost duty, you want G1 core because G1 core will apply stun upon minions death. And combat, Sidetrick and Growl because it's just the most powerful combat. But again, he works with other combats like he can work with Forge. Boss Trick and Lancelot, Anorex and Fireglide, and so on. Sty Saber and Dead Saurus, they need to be fully used to the kills. They need the ability to level 11. They need their specific core G metal. They need their 5-star combat to be good. And when you have everything, they're very solid actually, because besides stunning and doing a pretty decent amount of damage, he will also have 70% shield on himself for 20 seconds, so he will stall out quite a bit. He does fair amount of damage from his specific core and combat, and his combat also applies 70% slowdown, which no one is immune to. So yes, he can be very strong and a very tough one to deal with, but he needs probably the heaviest investment out of any bot here. So yeah, that's why he's a little bit lower. Rhinox and Tarantulas, you absolutely want their Transmetal core, no exceptions, because their Transmetal core can trap enemies and pretty much make them sitting ducks for a fair amount of time. And Forge of Souls would be the best choice again because hack immunity and overall just incredible. But again, he worked with other choices mentioned here. Slash and Reaper Snapper, you want G1, absolutely no exceptions. No Megatronus, no Alchemist, um, no Amalgamous. You want G1 because G1 absolutely outperforms every other core on Slash. Pretty much increases the damage by 50% from attacks and gives additional invisibility, which also increases more damage. Overall, just a nightmare. And I would definitely recommend going with a combat like Big Daddy and Groundhog, but again, works with other compatible combats here. Sentius Twins, well, when fully maxed out with Amalgamous core, they're very solid, but still, the Twist is just better for Amalgamous. But yeah, they're solid. So if you have them, if you like them, you can go for it. They can be very solid, especially with 5-star Sword of Balance. But otherwise, I'm not personally a huge fan. Leo Prime and Predacon Inferno. They may seem like a little of a weird choice, but some people started running them because first off they do a colossal amount of damage. Second thing, they buff a speed of nearby defenses upon casting ability. Third, they decrease speed of enemies that are affected, and they are ranged, so that's also pretty solid if you have them with a combat. Now, you can also have this have them with SB Optimus and Megatron. SB Optimus and Megatron are very strong, and this setup also works for offense. So that's another reason why people have them as outposts, because this setup can work for both offense and defense. And SB Optimus is also very solid. He's very strong. He can increase the attack of everyone nearby. So yeah, pretty solid. Again, you can dodge his ability quite easily, but otherwise, he does bring some decent value to the outpost. Now, Afterbreaker and Flame War, similarly to Swoop and Scourge, he can also be paired with Deluge for that specific combo that can make everyone hack. But regardless of it, he will also, stun enemies, do decent amount of damage. He will remove all shields that do not come from power cores. So he can be really, really menacing to deal with. And the best core for him would absolutely be Vector for revival. But otherwise, I guess you can go with something like HP or Liege to so he doesn't get hacked. And Sidechuck and Growl, yeah, that would be the best in slot combat, but he does work with some other ones. Vector and Nova. Now, they unfortunately do not work as reliably as they should. Sometimes their holos die upon deployment, but if they do not, if they end up working properly, they're very solid because they apply the portal or that does the acid, does the slowdown, and with G1 their decoys will stun, and their decoys also apply acid. They walk around, they distract enemies, they do a lot of damage at ability level 11. Overall, very solid. And he's also ranged, so he's long range by default, so he'll be standing at a pretty safe distance. And I would recommend Big Daddy and Groundhog. Uh, in general, companion combats, because I noticed that sometimes using a gun can interfere with his passive, and his passive is throwing a grenade that slows down enemies, and that slowdown is actually very useful. So I found that using constant interface with it, so that's why I would keep the companion. Grapple and Dirtbag. With G1, they can be very strong. Their ability damage is very high. It's also in an area. It blocks healing. Um, Overall, very solid bots. Their G1 also does additional mines that taunt enemies. And as for combat, I would go with Forge or Anorex for the reasons mentioned above before, because they improve survivability and add a ton of useful perks. Metal Hawk and Bomb Burst, they are very, very strong, and if you get hit by their ability, and if you do not have a combiner to uh, jump out of the effects, your team can be sitting duck because they will do very little damage. He can heavily suppress all the damage that they deal, and he can also deal a lot of damage in an area. So if you do not dodge this in a certain way, you can have a problem. Again, G1 because it increases damage and further decreases damage that enemies do, and nicely can fracas to block healing. Tiger Hawk and Waspinator are very similar to Swoop and Scourge. They also work with the combo mentioned above with Beachcomber and Deluge. They do heavy damage, they do slowdowns, and no one is immune to slowdowns. Very solid, and I would recommend to go with a companion for them. Uruk and Blood, G1 would be the best for defense because it gives them a lot of passive healing. It makes decoy much harder to kill, and the companion the combat would be Shieldron and Fangtron or Jason Barrow. Jason Barrow would be ideal, but other shield also works well, and he can also work with a couple of companions, but you can also even go with something like again like Bustrek and Lancelon, or Forge of Solus to give hack immunity, maybe some survivability, but otherwise Jason Barrow is plenty strong. Dinobot and Dinobot too. Leech Maximo to be immune to hacks, but he can also work with a Vector, I guess. And a companion should be, Sidetrack and Growl, and pretty much companions in general. They work very well. He can also work with Amalgamas, but again, there are better choices for Amalgamas. Hotspot and Tantrum. Do you want the G1 to always have Reflection, and you want Jason Barrow to get the healing that they offer and the further damage reduction. Overall, he has plenty of Reflection, so he can be a bit of a pain because he can reflect can deal a lot of damage back to enemies. He's a bit off meta, but he can be problematic to deal with in very special scenarios. Now, good up to communists and cyber tier, Crumbia and Felbat. They're a nightmare if you don't know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, they're probably the worst outpost in the game. But if you know what you are doing, and then they become pretty much a dud. And if you want to know how to deal with them, I have a video made on the channel, so feel free to check it out. Overall, they're strong because they can stun a lot of bots in an area, but if you know how to deal with it, their stuns will be useless against you. And I would go with a companion like Big Teddy and Groundhog, but this may actually change because Now, currently, as it is being released as a 5-star, they're considering to remove the passive stun that it provides. So you might actually consider it going something different, like a gun, like Nightstick and Fracas, for example, to shut down the healing. And as for the core, I have Nexus here, although Nexus doesn't really work on defense. It works visually, but it sometimes doesn't work in effect. But I suppose we will also have to a little bit wait and see what happens with the 5-star and how it works. But so far, it has a lot of weaknesses. Elite One and Lagnat, I definitely want to go with Armor and Mace because it gives a lot of survivability, and Enrox and Fireglide against for survivability and everything that you mentioned above. A lot of stun, they can do stunning, they can deal fair amount of damage and be really hard to kill to an extent. But otherwise, they can be very easy to deal with. Blades and Urge, again, you want G1 and Nightstick and Fracas. But similar to all mentioned above, if you dodge the ability, they are of much less of a problem. Smokescreen and Breakneck, they can one shot if you're not careful, if you don't know what you're doing, especially with G1 core, which does a lot of damage to your bots. Now going with Nightstick and Fracas because of heal blocking, but also works with, for example, Styler and Sunbeam because they do a lot of damage and can decrease the amount of damage that enemy squad does. You can also go with Option and Fireline to do damage in an area. Very flexible ways to go. You can go even with the glitch and the gator face, but again, easy bots to deal with if you know what you're doing. Now the last tier, finally, Cheeto and Black Arachnia. Uh, Amalgamas is the best choice for them, but since they are not so great, you'll pretty much probably end up using their Transmetal core, and the combat would be Sarchok and Growl because they can. It's very powerful combat, and while they are in their alt mode, they can't use a weapon. So yeah, that's pretty much the reason why. And they do for example, compared to Twin Twist and Coelagen, they do much less damage. Ability lasts shorter, and they are less bulky, less survivable. No stun immunity by default. Overall, significantly inferior version of Twin Twist. Gno, yeah, it's just Gno. Both factions get Gno. Um, G1 core increases speed of the sharks and Sidetrack and Growl as a minion. He's too squishy, very squishy boss, so you can easily kill him. Um, he can deal a fair amount of damage, but if you have a tank or a healer or anything, or any AoE damage, he's just not gonna do much. Good early on, but later on, easy to deal with. And Drift and Barricade, similar to everyone mentioned previously, they can do some fair amount of damage, but if you know how to deal with this bot, becomes of very little relevance. And you want to go with G1 for more, just better performance, and either Star Saber or Dark Saber and a Forge of Souls, depending on what is available to you. And again, for the reasons mentioned above. Whew, okay, and now let's finish it with the combats. Why these combats are actually good. Sidetrack and Growl does damage in an area first from afar, and upon being killed once, becomes unkillable for 10 seconds and goes on a rampage where he does 4 times the amount of damage, and after the invisibility is gone, he also explodes if he's killed, and he does a ton of damage. He is an absolute nightmare overall. Big Daddy and Groundhog, they do a ton of damage from very, 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 very far range, and that's pretty much it. Very straightforward, a ton of damage. Very, very problematic to deal with for a lot of players. Now, SB Optimus and SB Megatron, they're very tough. They can heal, they have the reflect, they buff nearby defenses. Overall, very solid. Zora and Slugfest, they just do a lot of damage. They are inferior to, for example, Big Daddy and Groundhog in a lot of situations, but very solid. They are better for offense than for defense, but absolutely work on defense, sure. Nightstick and Fracas, pretty much mentioned above. Blocks healing, overall just incredible. Gives lifesteal damage. Amazing, best gun in the game. Styler and Sunbeam, I touched up to them a little bit in regards to Smokescreen. Um, they they heavily decrease damage that the squad does, and they also do a fair amount of damage on their own, so they're solid. Top Shot and Fireline, a lot of fire damage in an area. Again, really paired well with Smokescreen G1. Very solid gun to use. Boss Trek and Lancelot, they give hack immunity and do a lot of damage. That's pretty much it. Pretty straightforward and very good. And Rex and Firelight, like I said before, it was survivability based combat. Jason Barrow, same thing, very survivability based combat, a lot of shields and health recovery. Forge, same thing. I already talked about Forge a lot. Cosmic Cross Blaster increases damage and applies the Rust effect, which decreases speed. I believe that enemies do, and also makes them receive more elemental damage, which is very strong. And Prima Star Saber spawns decoys. It should be one decoy, but sometimes it spawns multiple decoys. Decoys have very solid stats. It does a lot of damage in a area. Overall, very solid. Whew. So yeah, that's pretty much it. This was hard. This was hard to go over, but yeah, I hope you found this very helpful because I'm almost out of breath going over all of them and just talking non-stop. So yeah, let me know in the comments if you have any questions, if you have any suggestions for any upcoming video, and if you will stay until the end, thank you very much. Approximately 10 to 15% of people, of viewers, stay until the end of every video that I make. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it because this is a very long video as well. So I really appreciate you and yeah, thank you for watching and see you in the next one.